Hey, what's going on, guys? This is Hard Redux and welcome back to another technology video. Today, well, what is this? This is 40 times optical zoom. Now, a lot of you might not know why that seems really special, or why it is really special, or why it's even a thing. But for me, this is really special because this camera, this consumer camera, very, very consumer, is positioned pretty much all the way at the other end of the house. And I'm standing at the complete other end, and that's really hard to do. So why don't most other cameras have this functionality? Why don't they, like if this consumer camera that cost, what, $400 10 years ago, can do 40x optical zoom in such a small, slim form factor, why can't any of the other cameras on the market, and that have been on the market since, or before? Well, in this video, we're gonna find out. Let's go. So this is 40x optical zoom. I'm gonna stop saying optical zoom. I'm just gonna start saying zoom because that's all we're gonna talk about. We're not talking about intelligent zoom or artificial zoom or digital zoom or any of those. Just talking about optical zoom, so I'm just gonna use that. If this is 40 times zoom, well, what can this lens deliver? Well, this is a huge lens that was given to me by my girlfriend's grandpa, actually. And I only have one camera that's usable with it, but it's a really good one. This is actually a Nikon lens. And as you can see, it looks basically like a freaking telescope. Well, what's the zoom factor on this? Because this one's just fixed zoom. You can't change the zoom factor on it. It's not like a zoom lens. It's just one, what's called a prime lens. And so it's just a one zoom level at all times. Well, this is just a 25x zoom. And it looks like a freaking telescope. So to tell you about zoom stuff with cameras, I need to tell you a little bit about how to get the X factor from, a lens's values, whatever those may be. The X factor, let's call it. So how do you get the X factor? Well, you basically take, I'm gonna use my lens as an example, the lens I'm currently shooting with, which is 24 to 240. Those are the two factors that you have to, do calculations with in order to get the X factor, the times, the X after, 5x or 10x or whatever. So how do you do that? Well, it's basically the difference between the two numbers. So if you take 24 and you take 240, how many times do you have to multiply 24 to get 240? Well, that's just easy. I mean, that's obviously 10. The difference between those two numbers is 10. So if this lens is 10x, we can compare it to other cameras, right? Not so fast. So we can't compare them? Well, we can. We just have to do some more calculations. Boring time is here. So this is a camcorder and it has a lens, but the factors don't exactly match up with what my hyper awesome camera lens has on the camera I'm shooting this on. In fact, the numbers are so different that we have to multiply by many times this camera's numbers to be able to compare it at all with this camera accurately. So how do we do that? Well, the numbers for this camera are 24 to 240, but the numbers for this one, for the lens on this camera, are 3.7 to 92.5. And as we can see from the starting number, 3.7, we definitely can't compare that to 24. So how are we gonna fix this? Well, 3.7 is close enough to 4, and that works out with 24 quite well if we multiply the starting number by 6. That makes sense. So it's not going to be very accurate, but it's going to be accurate enough for my purposes in this video. So if we multiply 3.7 times 6, and we have to multiply the other number for this to be accurate, so we multiply 92.5 times 6, we'll get, well, whatever we get. and that'll be close enough to the factors that we have to start with to compare them to a camera of, starting values of 24. But it always matters specifically what the first number is. It doesn't really matter what the second factor is. It just matters what the first number in the range is. So 3.7 and 24. You can also divide, 24 to 240 by the same amount theoretically and come up with something close to 3.7 from 24. In fact, that might actually be preferable to multiplying these numbers, but whatever. Boring time is over. Let's go to the table to meet some cameras to compare. Okay, so here I am at the table, and I have a bunch of cameras here and even on the floor, and I'm going to start showing you what the zoom factors on some of these cameras, you can expect to be, and what you'll be expecting to find, and, even just what they are, because this says it's 35mm wide, 35x zoom, but then there's 35x iZoom. What's iZoom? So we're going to figure that out. So first, I want to rule something out. Look at this thing. This is some kind of 1080p HD camcorder DV, but it definitely doesn't use mini DV, and it definitely isn't 1080p. So what is it? Well, this is basically a scamcorder. And I got this off of eBay for like 25 bucks a couple of years ago because I was interested. This definitely does not have 16x optical zoom. Pretty much any optical zoom. This only has digital zoom, and that's what I'm trying to rule out here. Digital zoom is not what we're talking about. So this is out of here. Let's actually target some cameras that have optical zoom, and that's another thing I want to talk about. Cameras that do have optical zoom but also have digital zoom. Pretty much all of them do this. In fact, here's one of them right here. This is a Panasonic This is a Panasonic camcorder that has a hard drive in it, and you can put SD cards in it as well. But as we can see right there, this appears to have iZoom, 35x of iZoom. Now what the hell is iZoom? Well, that is actually intelligent zoom, and what that's meant to be is digital zoom plus optical zoom. And those two added together for this camcorder equals 35x. Now the problem with that is, that doesn't really work. And digital zoom was much worse than optical zoom, at least, quality-wise. So I'm only going to talk about optical zoom. So we're going to completely discount this number, and we're going to look for the optical zoom factor, which should be on the lens somewhere. And as we can see right there, it says 25x optical zoom right there. And that is what we want. So let's get started. So what was the lens I was shooting with earlier when I was on the seat? This is that lens. It is a 24 to 240 optical zoom lens. And it's locked right now, so you can't zoom. But as soon as I unlock it with the switch, we can zoom. And it zooms pretty far. I mean, having basically 2 times the extension from your camera that even the lens is pretty crazy. And what's even crazier is we can actually fit this on pretty damn small cameras. So let's try to fit this. So we take the cover off of this, take the cover off of this, and the mating ritual shall ensue. Red line goes on the red line, and there we have it. An extremely unbalanced camera. That's pretty crazy. So yeah, that is pretty damn funny, but impractical since this is a full frame lens and this is not a full frame camera. Also, something I want to say quickly is this is a pretty expensive lens. This is about $1,000 USD. This is actually the highest zoom lens you can get in terms of, using it with these cameras and some other cameras that we're going to be seeing throughout this video. But this is the highest zoom lens you can get. It goes from a reasonable zoom, like a normal kind of zoom level for consumers, to an actual like zoom, like super zoom. This is basically a super zoom lens in terms of the lenses that are available. That's because this is the max. They don't really go higher than this. And that kind of annoys me. But we'll get back to that, and why it annoys me, and maybe even why this is the thing. Because, well, they can make lenses that are better than this, that have higher zooms. Ugh, but they just won't do it. And I'll explain why later on. And note that this is a consumer camera, meant to be sold to consumers, that does have a flash, but does not have a lens built in. This is a camera you have to put your own lenses onto. And most of the cameras we'll be looking at aren't like that. They are consumer cameras, but they have their own lens built in. So what's the first one we should look at? Well, I want to start with one that's decently old, and it's a camcorder, actually. This is a Sony Handycam, I don't know which one, there it is, HDR XR160, if you could see right there. There you go, HDR XR160. This is a Handycam that has a hard drive built into it, actually, and well, it's pretty damn compact. And well, you wouldn't really guess it, but this camcorder has 30x optical zoom. It says it right there. Isn't that crazy? Let me turn this thing on. Might take a while since I haven't actually turned this on in a while. And there we go. Let's zoom in all the way. And there you go. I believe this does have intelligent zoom, but we're not going to talk about that. But I'll just mention that it is 42x. So that's pretty freaking cool, right? Especially since this digital camera from Canon could never even hope of matching that with only 16x optical zoom. Actually, it says it right there, 16x optical zoom. I don't know if this has batteries in it. Yeah, no, it doesn't. It does have a card in it though. This is a 4 gig SD card. Yeah, this camera has some issues with rechargeable batteries. It'll die much quicker than it should. These two cameras are very good examples of the factors I was talking about. I mean, here's a 5.0 to 80 millimeter. This is that range I was talking about. And here is a 2.1 to 63, right there. So yeah, that's 16x for you. And yes, it has a flash. Okay, next up we have one of the big boys in the ring. Can't even fit this on the whole camera. This is a Canon Vixia GX10 camcorder. Why is this special to me? It's because this is the pretty much first and last Canon camcorder for consumers that can record 4K 60. But let's see what its optical zoom capabilities are. As we can see here, has 15x optical zoom, only 15x, whereas that normal consumer camera we were talking about before had 16x in its non-camcorder body and its really slim body, so this only having 15x kind of sucks. And as we can see here, it is 8.3 to 124.5. That's the range I was talking about before. Alright, another oldie coming in. We have a Sony Handycam. This is actually a mini DV camcorder, one that has 120x digital zoom, which is kind of crazy. Like, why would anyone want that? But okay, because well, mini DV quality already kind of sucks. I mean, it's good for the 90s, but you know, for the 2010s, god no. Until 2020s, forget it. 120x digital zoom, that would destroy your image. I don't know anyone that will actually want to use that. But let's see what the actual zoom factors are on this. So if we take a look at the lens here, we can see that the zoom factor is 4.5 to 45. I know there's a comma right there, but that's really supposed to be a dot. So it's 4.5 to 45. So that this is actually a 10x zoom. In this is a sub HD camcorder, and this thing already has optical 10x optical zoom. That's crazy. It even shoots on tape. Look, take a look at this. Yeah. This thing shoots on freaking tape, and it already has 10x optical zoom. So that's pretty crazy. We got another oldie coming in. This is that camcorder I was showing up before when I was on my seat. This is another tape-based camcorder. However, this one boasts 450x digital zoom. That's crazy! And the quality of this one's even worse than the other one, so why anyone would use that? Well, probably because there wasn't really anything better. At least for this camera. So, let's take a look at its X factor, or its range, because we don't really care about the digital zoom. Here we are, and it says 25x. This camcorder from 2001 that shoots on tape has the same zoom level as this $1,500 lens. And again, the range of this is 3.7 to 92.5. 25x in 2001. Pretty crazy. All right, next, we actually have a pretty recent camera, all things considered. This is a Panasonic Lumix S5 II digital camera. This is not a camcorder, however, I would use it for shooting video, but its zoom factor isn't actually all that great. As we can see here, its zoom range is only 24 to 105, and that's pretty poor. And actually it says right here, 24 to 105. And this lens was about $1,200, so that's not very good. However, this is about the best you could expect from this camera, since, well, all of these cameras, they take different kinds of mounts. And this lens won't fit on this camera, and this lens that I was using before also won't fit on this camera, because corporate snobbery. And basically what that means is, this is the most zoom you can get if you want to start with a factor of 24 millimeters, which is about what a normal camera, like your phone, or like another camcorder, like this one, would basically look like. Of course, you have to multiply the numbers that you get from this to compare it to this, but what they look like, you can compare. And this looks normal, and this looks normal. But the difference is, this has a range that goes much farther than this one does. And for how big these are in comparison, that's pretty freaking sad. You would have thought they would do better, but I'll explain why they couldn't or wouldn't later on as well. And there's actually another lens for this camera, apart from the one that's already on there, and it's this one. It's another very expensive lens. So let's take this one off with this button on the side. There we go, there's the lens. There we go, let's put this one on. There we go, red dot goes to the red dot. And this has an even worse factor. However, it's needed because this other lens, didn't have all that I needed. Because this camera has different modes it can shoot in. And the problem with that is it decreases the field of view when you're shooting video, which makes you need a lower number than 24 for your starting value. So to make it look normal, I had to make it shoot at about 18. And this is the only lens that I found that could go from, well, something reasonable for shooting video to something more. And this is only about 1.5 times zoom, going from here to here. This is only a 2x zoom lens, effectively, going from the very lowest value 14 to the highest value 28. So that's pretty goddamn piss poor. And that really pisses me off. And that also means you would have to swap lenses whenever you want to have a bigger zoom value. That just sucks. Also, these lenses are pretty much the same price, and they were both over $1,000. And so was the camera. It's quite offensive. Put everything back together. Come together right now over me. Here's another oldie coming in. This is a Nikon something. There you go. There's the model. Oh, okay. It's a Coolpix X1D700. What? Okay, whatever. Look at the tiny ass screen on this thing. It's so adorable. But this thing actually is, I think, from the 90s or maybe early 2000s, and it has a 5 megapixel sensor, first of all. It also has 8x zoom. I'm pretty sure that actually isn't optical zoom. That's intelligent zoom again. So that sucks. But if we open the lens here, it actually doesn't tell us jack. What? It's on the lens cap. Okay, so what the hell? Okay, so it turns out that actually is optical zoom. This camera from the 90s has freaking 8x optical zoom, 8.9 to 71.2 millimeters, and that's the range. So Wow, that's pretty good. Okay, now here's another pretty big ass camera with a pretty big ass lens on it. This is a Canon R6 Mark II, or Canon EOS R6 Mark II. This is a camera that overheats after 45 minutes if you record video on it, and you can't record video for like an hour afterwards. Now, there's a lot of things wrong with this camera. It doesn't have a flash, for one. For two, the mics suck, but at least it has stereo mics. It is a pretty big camera. I mean, compare that to one of the camcorders from earlier. It basically dwarfs it. But this does have a lens on it. And again, this is that lens type that I was talking about before that I'm actually shooting on this camera with. However, I'm actually using a different lens on the camera I'm shooting with right now. But this one is a full-size lens, and this is actually a higher grade lens, so that's more light in, no matter how much you zoom. My other zoom lenses don't do that. This one does, but here's the problem, and here's a catch. This is only a 24 to 105 zoom. That's right, this isn't even a 5x zoom. They couldn't even pull that off. This is about a 4.4, maybe 4.7x optical zoom, and that sucks. That's just plain ass. And I don't even know why they would bother selling something like that, but people keep buying them, or else, you know, they wouldn't be selling them, so god damn it. And this is about as big as that other lens from before, as we can see, or you can't actually, there we go. It's about as big as the other lens. Starting here, wait no, starting here. My other lens is actually bigger, that's because it has a higher zoom factor. You got 24 to 105 compared to 24 to 240. These are both full sensor lenses or full frame lenses, but yeah, this one is effectively twice as good as this one. Even though this lets in more light, 5x optical zoom, to me, is pretty damn useless, and 10x is almost useless, but it's the best I'm gonna get, so that's what I have. And we'll get back to why this zoom is so paltry later. Don't worry, we're almost done with the oldies, but I have just a couple more. Two more, literally. This is my dad's old digital camera. It's actually a DSLR, and it is the Canon Digital Rebel XT. This actually uses a different lens mount. This uses the EOS EF lens mount, which it actually, I think they have more lenses for, well, because it's been around since like the freaking 90s or something, but this camera is from 2003. And as we can see, this lens has a zoom factor of 18 to 55. And it's actually made so it's more compact. It zooms like more within itself. Let's see what the actual numbers are. Oh wait, those are the numbers. EFS 18 to 55. Those are the numbers. And we can see them again on the lens itself. Here we are, Canon zoom lens EFS, which is the non-full frame sensor version that I was talking about, 18 to 55. So that's still pretty paltry. I mean, 18 to 55, that's not even a 5x optical zoom, so that again really sucks. But this camera and this lens were probably picked for different reasons, and this camera and the lens are both, you know, 21 plus years old, so we'll give it a pass for that. This is a pretty damn good camera too. Okay, we got one more oldie, and this one is probably the oldest of them all. This is actually a film camera. Yeah, that's right, this thing shoots 25mm film. 25mm. What was I thinking? Actually, you can see that there is, in fact, some film in there. Now, why the hell am I showing you a film camera? Doesn't the stuff not even apply to film cameras and only apply to digital ones? Well, no, in fact, this stuff applies to film cameras too. Mainly because, well, the zoom stuff started on film cameras. In fact, everything here started in the film industry. So, of course it's going to apply. And since zoom doesn't really have anything to do with the actual film itself, and it just works with bending light, well, of course it's relevant. And we can basically compare the numbers just the same. And this is a pretty crazy lens. This is a 28 to 300 lens. And that's pretty nuts. Look at that. This camera and lens are probably from the early to mid 90s, and this is a 28-300 zoom lens. I'd take this any day if I could use it with my camera that I'm using to record this video. They just don't make them like they freaking used to. And keep in mind, this is a single lens solution. This is one lens. This is one lens that can go from 28 to 300 millimeters. I don't know what kind of factor that is, but it's definitely more than 10x. Here's one of the newest camcorders that I have in my collection here. I'm actually trying to get rid of these. I actually had 2 of these, but I got rid of the other one already. This is a Sony Handycam FDR AX43A. And yeah, I don't really like this thing, mainly because the video quality isn't really much better than an iPhone, if at all. Can't shoot at rates more than 100 megabits. The colors are off, and it's basically just not a very good camcorder. However, the optical image stabilization in this is awesome, and that's the only reason why I think anyone should even consider buying one of these. Additionally, this camcorder has a 20x optical zoom, which compared to my favorite camcorder that I showed earlier, this is actually a better optical zoom, but it still can't beat Sony's own old camcorders, which have 30x optical zoom in a smaller body. But again, we'll get to why the zooms became so much worse than they used to be. After the final camera, and it is the one that I think you will be most astonished by. It's actually my mom's old camera that she bought to go to Africa with. This is the Canon SX720HS digital camera, 21.1 megapixels from around 2014 or 2015. This camera is insane, and you can see why right there. This crazy thing has 40x optical zoom. This isn't clear image zoom or digital zoom. This is specifically 40x optical zoom with image stabilization. Look at the factor right there. 4.3 to 172 millimeters. That is a huge range, and that is indeed 40x. I have never seen another camera, or camcorder for that matter, that had this range of zoom. And it does work. It actually works pretty freaking well, way better than I would have expected. I can take pictures at 40x, or else they definitely wouldn't have put it in here if you couldn't actually use it practically. This makes 40x optical zoom practical. And this is what, a $600, $400 camera like 10 years ago? Let's turn it on. And this is actually the camera that I shot this video's intro on. I did actually shoot it at 40x optical zoom. Let's max it out to max whack. That is 40x optical zoom. Let's compare this to a 10x zoom lens. From the start of the lens, yeah, it's hardly even a comparison. This thing is just way bigger. And this is at max whack. I probably won't even be able to fit this one on max whack. But let's see. Well, there you go. Yeah, I can't even fit it. Let's do this. Yeah, there you go. It's comical, and this one's so heavy it even goes back down on its own. So this is almost impractical. But this actually makes 40x optical zoom practical to use. Actually, it's at 52x. Let me turn that down a little bit. There you go. 40x optical zoom. Let's zoom it back out. And this thing doesn't actually take that bad of pictures. It takes pretty bad video in low light, but pretty much all consumer camcorders did back then. It has pretty decent macro-ish functionality, and yeah, this thing can take pictures and video up to 40x. This is a 1080p camera. It has Wi-Fi, has a stereo mic, it has a freaking built-in flash, which, like, even the camera I'm shooting on now doesn't even have a stereo mic or built-in flash. I had to add those things onto it, and even then you can't have a flash and a mic on the camera I'm shooting this on at the same time. But this one has all of this in this hyper compact body. Let's look at this. Let's do this again. Let's exercise this. 40x zoom. Let's put it out to max whack, and let's watch it collapse. Let's watch everything go back into its tiny body. That is just hot. And there you have it. This camera is simply ridiculous. Do not put it on the lens. I don't want to break this thing. This is like a historical artifact to me now. Ew! Look what the stupid other cameras have done to my arm and the table. Look at that. It's disgusting. Dude, the freaking bands from some of these old crusty cameras are melting on me. So why are the zoom factors on some of these lenses so horrible when there's definitely cameras that have really good freaking zoom? Well, I think it all comes back to why that first number is actually so small. I mean, this one, the first number in the range is 4.3. The first number in this one's range is 24. Now, you may have asked, why is there such a variation in these things in the first number? Well, I think it actually comes back to sensor size and how big the lens has to be to accommodate such sensors. For example, the camera that I'm shooting on right now has a pretty big sensor, bigger than most cameras. And actually, I was gonna take the lens off of the R6 II and show you, but yeah, that's actually how big the sensor is, but there's a curtain covering it. And as you can imagine, that's not fitting in your phone. And camcorders and cameras like this one, they do have pretty big sensors in them. I think this one is a 1-inch sensor. However, that's still smaller than the one in here, and it's small enough to where they could reasonably make a 20x optical zoom lens and still, make it a pretty compact device. Sensor sizes have grown a lot in the past few decades. Devices like these having, pretty decent sensors for the size. The pixel density on these sensors isn't actually that bad, so they can afford to be pretty decently small. And this does have 25x optical zoom, whereas this one has 30x, and these definitely do not have 1-inch sensors in them like the newer ones do. And that's, I think, a lot of the reason why this change happened, is because cameras just started having gargantuan sensors, and, well, frankly, they didn't used to. Also, you have to consider these manufacturers like Canon and Sony, and Nikon, as we have seen previously, they have to kind of dial back what they're doing, think about it a bit. What does a normal consumer generally do with their camera or camcorder? You don't really need a huge zoom for that, and if you do, well, for those people, for the small amount of people that are going to take pictures of things really far away, they make huge ass lenses, like this Nikon lens. This is a 25x lens, and it's only 25x. You can't zoom it out or zoom in any further. This is a 25x, what's called a prime lens. And that's for the people who want to take like pictures of wildlife outside, because this isn't very good inside. I mean, it takes a lot of light to make that thing work properly. So the manufacturers have to balance what people want, what people will use, what people are willing to buy and pay for, what Canon makes, because, all their stuff is really expensive. This is a $1,000 lens, and it's, made out of plastic and rubber and stuff. Of course, there's a lot of glass elements in here. There's a lot of science behind how these lenses are actually made, and they definitely could make something like this that works like this, so it would be compact. You'd still be able to zoom quite far. In fact, you'd probably make one of these that's 400 millimeters and that doesn't zoom all the way and physically actually zoom all the way. It could move them internally, and they could, I could make up mechanisms for how they would do this all day, and I've actually been doing that. And they could implement my mechanisms, my theories. However, just not enough people will buy them for that to be worth it, for them to put in the effort and then sell the product at an absurd price, like $8,000 to $10,000. That's probably how much it would have to cost out of necessity, just because of how much time, energy, thought, resources, money has been spent on making a lens that zooms twice as far as this one does. So they're just not going to do that. And if they are working on it, I would buy it. But that doesn't mean anyone else would buy it, or enough people would buy it to make it a worthwhile thing for them to develop. And that's why our zoom lenses are pretty paltry. That's why this is 10x, why it's stuck at 10x, and why there is no other lenses that can go above that reasonably from 24 millimeters to something. The highest from 24 a lens like this can go right now is 240, because the companies simply aren't willing to spend the resources to develop the products to make that happen. And this doesn't really apply to camcorders, because camcorders, they only have to have one lens. But cameras like this, they need to apply to basically everyone. You need to be able to do basically everything with this camera by adding lenses onto it. And that's probably the only reason why zoom lenses like this exist at all. But on camcorders it's quite different, because camcorders, they can only have one lens. And because of that, they have to put all of the work into that one lens to make it do basically everything a consumer will want to do. And yeah, that really does mean zooming quite far into their subject to get the shot they want to get. And that's, again, probably the only reason why they even bothered making this 15x optical zoom. And the reason why it isn't maybe 20x or 25x or maybe even 40x optical zoom is just because they didn't need to put in the effort to make that happen, and because the sensor is quite large. If the sensor was smaller, if the sensor was about the size that it was, this sensor is in this camcorder, we might have had 35x optical zoom in this camcorder. But since this has a 1-inch sensor, a pretty big sensor for the time, they just couldn't put in the resources to make this a zoomier camcorder. And that, I think, wraps up the story of why are zoom lenses just not very zoomery anymore. They're pretty underwhelming. And I think I've explained why that is, and also why the old stuff has better zoom. Well, it's because they could have better zoom, but today things are much more difficult to deal with, practically speaking. But this camera should go down in history as the zoomiest camera to ever exist. And with that, guys, I thank you all for watching. This has been Redux, and I'll see you all in the next live stream, short, or video. Whatever that may be, thanks for watching, guys. Have a great rest of your evening. See you guys. Autofocus. There we go. Just cuteness. The mom alarm.
The two moms.
Indeed. Oh, jeez. There we go. Who's Hans? If you liked the video, please consider subscribing.